Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Wolf Den podcast. My name is Luke Wolf. I'm so happy you're here. Thank you for tuning in, and let's get into it. Welcome everybody. Today we're going to be all over the place. This is being recorded on Tuesday night, October 1st. There are so many rumors. There's a big NBA trade. A lot happened in this past week of football, whether that be NFL or college. There's so much to talk about, and we're going to hop right into this one. Thank you for tuning in. All right, everybody, let's hop right into this one. And fair warning, we're going to be all over the place today because there was just so much in these past couple days to talk about. But we're going to get it started with today's news. Tuesday, October 1st, Davante Adams has officially requested a trade from the Las Vegas Raiders. What's the best landing spot? Where do I think he's going to go? There's a lot to look at. The common ones I'm seeing are the Jets, obviously reuniting him and Rodgers. It's an interesting prospect, especially with Garrett Wilson kind of underperforming so far. I just don't think it'll work for cap space reasons, and the Jets don't have too much to trade anymore. I've seen the Steelers. The Steelers are trying to get Davante Adams to Pittsburgh, and I see why. Pittsburgh could use a receiver next to George Pickens. Again, I'm wondering what they have to trade that's really worth it other than their draft capital. I'm assuming the Raiders would still like to have some sort of player in there, not go from a great receiver to just picks. Could be wrong, though. We'll see what happens. Obviously, the other team's going to have the leverage here because Davante Adams has publicly requested a trade. There's a lot of teams he could go to. I have also seen the Ravens. The Ravens would be unstoppable with Davante Adams. That would be an incredible fit. It just doesn't work. Cap space is a thing. The cap would be... It would not work in Baltimore. So that idea is not happening. I've seen him going to the Chiefs. Again, not happening. Cap reasons, and they're in the same division. They're not going to trade him there. I would expect him to go to the NFC. Obviously, the Raiders aren't contending right now, so for them, it's probably just going to be a best package available kind of thing. But what I'm doing, if I am in the Raiders' position, I am calling up that Bengals GM, and I am going, hey, give us T. Higgins. We will take those contract disputes off of your hands. We will take T. Higgins, and we also want draft capital because the Bengals are in a win now mode. T. Higgins, not young, but he's not old. He still has time. If you go into next season with T. Higgins, and Jacoby Myers is not a bad receiver too, and you bring in a new quarterback, that revamped offense could actually look all right. And T. Higgins, he's going to be a solid guy for the next 4 or 5 seasons. Adams, who knows how long he has. Meanwhile, for the Bengals, you're putting together a top 5 receiving duo ever. Like, Jamar Chase and Davante Adams is insane. That's one where it's a win-win. You grab T. Higgins and some draft capital from the Bengals, and you're sitting pretty because the Bengals off to a rough start. And honestly, if I'm the Raiders, I could even be looking at throwing Michael Mayer in a trade if that means we can get back a first-round pick. But Davante Adams for T. Higgins and a Cincinnati second-rounder sounds like a really nice trade. It sounds really nice. I'm not really sure where else Adams could go. He could go to Buffalo. That would be a very solid fit, but that's a good team with nothing to trade other than draft capital. I don't know what they're going to give up to get Davante Adams. It's more of just a player fit. But there is really just... Davante Adams is someone you trade for if you want to compete right now. There's not many competing teams that can afford his contract or that can afford to trade for him, especially with their draft capital being less valuable. I personally think that Raiders to Bengals trade would be perfect, but overall, we'll see how that Davante Adams trade shapes up. Bringing it to the NCAA, some college football, the first thing we're going to look at is Ole Miss and Utah, two teams that started off so strong, especially Ole Miss. That is a team that I expected to see in the SEC championship because their schedule was so easy. But they managed to mess it up. They take a loss to Kentucky, and not only a loss, but just an ugly loss. If you watch this game, Jackson Dart just did not look like Jackson Dart, to say the least. It was overall just very disappointing, and Kentucky's a team that kept it close with Georgia and has now upset Ole Miss. Don't be surprised if Kentucky is ranked here pretty soon. They're having themselves a decent season outside of their blowout loss to South Carolina. Utah, they take a bad loss. This one is going to hurt them. The Big 12, as I've said before, is wide open. And Arizona comes out, and Arizona has not had a good start to their season. They already have that big loss to Kansas State. But Arizona is still very much competing for that Big 12 title now that they have knocked off Utah, who was ranked number 10, the highest ranked Big 12 team. Utah was stopped dead in their tracks by Arizona, and for Utah, this hurts a lot because you were hoping to capitalize off of how bad Arizona started, weren't able to do it, and it's just a rough game. And especially for Utah, your biggest issue is Cam Rising is injured once again. Utah with Cam Rising is an incredible team, but we've seen it time and time again. He can't stay on the field, and when he's not on the field, Utah is not a great team. I don't want to fully write them off because the Big 12 is such an insane conference. But if Cam Rising isn't back soon, their season will be over because Utah without Cam Rising is not a team worth much. It's not a great team. Another team that I want to talk about is BYU coming out and beating Baylor. It was a close one, but Baylor is rising up in those rankings after they smacked Kansas State, which aged well for them as Kansas State beat Oklahoma State. We'll talk about that more later. But BYU looking better than expected. This is not a team anyone really expected to make noise. They went out and blew out a 13th ranked Kansas State team, 38-9. This week 6 matchup, Arizona versus BYU, is going to be huge. If Arizona wins this one, they're straight back in that Big 12 title race. If BYU wins this one, they kind of slam the door on Arizona and solidify themselves as contenders for this Big 12 title, because although they've taken down Kansas State pretty convincingly, I'm not sold on this BYU team. They still haven't shown me enough to make them the favorite. But if they jump up to 6-0 and 3-0 in the conference, we're going to have to start looking at them to come out of the Big 12. So there were some crazy games this past week of NCAA football, and we're going to talk about more of them, but I just wanted to cover Ole Miss and Utah. Another one to kind of keep a little eye on is Miami against Tech looked very questionable. I thought it was more Tech looking good than Miami looking bad. So, Tech could make a little resurgence in their season after their expectations were pretty high and they didn't come up to it, but they were very, very close to winning that game against Miami. Some say they should have won, with that final play being pretty insane. Miami, this is a game that they're supposed to win pretty convincingly, but it's an in-conference Friday night game. Stuff like that happens. On to our next topic of the day. We're looking at 3 teams up here in the NFL that they're contenders. We know they're contenders, but they haven't quite showed it this season. They come out in week 4 and they finally show us those 3 teams, being San Fran coming out and smacking Patriots. The Patriots have shown that they're a team that can stick in games they're not supposed to. Obviously, San Fran really has to get a win against a good team, because right now, beating the Jets and Patriots isn't too impressive, but their 2 losses are 1-possession losses. As the schedule starts to heat up, we'll find out if San Fran is really what we think they are. But the 2 teams that really showed it to me are the 2 teams that I had going to the Super Bowl in the preseason. Baltimore comes out on Sunday night and smacks the 3-0 Bills. It was an absolute beatdown. It was never in question. It felt like from the very first play, we knew what was going to happen. I liked from the Ravens, I liked the run game where they really got their running backs involved, and I liked how you didn't see much from their receivers. Their receivers weren't doing much, but when they were, Lamar was making the correct passes, those chunk plays that really just help electrify a drive. But they're going back to what they've done in the past that has worked, where if we just punch the ball through the lines, get 5 yards every play, it works for them. And it worked against Buffalo. They broke off some big ones, and overall they end up winning 35-10. Josh Allen has a rough one, but there were a lot of factors in that one, and Josh Allen is still my MVP favorite as of right now. The other team is the Lions. They come out against Seattle. In Detroit, your defense still scares me. But your offense, oh my goodness. Their offense is looking so strong. Goff, not a single incompleted pass. He's a quarterback that hasn't got the respect he deserves. He is incredible. The Lions have 2 RB1s with Gibbs and Montgomery getting 14 and 12 carries, both of them having a touchdown. Jameson Williams has finally arrived. It feels like we've waited forever for Jameson Williams to finally be what they drafted him for. He's coming out and doing it. Amon-Ra, he's getting open like we expected. Sam Laporta getting the ball like we expect. Everything is just clicking with that Lions offense. The defense needs a lot of work, although Aiden Hutchinson is looking like an early defensive player, the year candidate. The defense is a unit, still needs a lot of work. But overall, this Lions offense is scary. It is fast. It is high-powered, just like we expected it to be. On to the next thing. We're going to talk about this Alabama-Georgia game. Man, and there's really a couple, like, there's so many stories in just this one game. You have the number 2 Bulldogs going to Tuscaloosa in just an incredible game. Best game I've watched in a long time. And Jalen Milroe comes out, and look, I've been very critical of Jalen Milroe, but coming out against this Georgia defense and being so decisive, so quick, and passing for almost 400 yards and running for another 100 yards for a total touchdown. He is crazy. This is a guy that now belongs in that Heisman race, now belongs in that number 1 quarterback off the draft board race, because he had an incredible game against one of the best defenses in college football. From Georgia, I like the fight I saw. What a comeback. But what slammed the door on Georgia's comeback was the 17-year-old, the true freshman, Ryan Williams. And I want to take Ryan Williams' performance and first just look at that, but I want to tell you guys the ridiculousness of this freshman class. First of all, Ryan Williams, He's having an unbelievable season. It feels like every week we see a highlight from him. He's 17. It's insane. He didn't play his senior year of high school, and he comes out here as a true freshman. He has 462 yards on only 16 receptions. He's getting you about 30 yards a reception. He has 5 touchdowns, and he comes out and has his biggest game in the most important game that he's going to play all season against Georgia. He looks incredible. There was one other freshman in the entire class with that 92 high school ranking at that receiver position. That was Jeremiah Smith, who's also been unbelievable. I cannot describe to you how crazy this freshman class really is, because you have Ryan Williams doing crazy stuff like that, and I still think he's the second best true freshman receiver. I'm saying it now. Jeremiah Smith is better. Once Ohio State goes out and plays somebody, he's going to show you. Jeremiah Smith is the greatest high school receiver prospect I have laid my eyes on. I'm obviously younger, so I didn't see a lot of the legendary guys in there, but Jeremiah Smith coming out of high school is unbelievable to me. I watch his film, and it makes me want to shed a tear, because there's genuinely nothing. There's no weak point in his game, and once Ohio State finally plays a team where Jeremiah Smith has to play 4 quarters, we're going to see the same way we just saw Ryan Williams against Georgia. We're going to see just how good Jeremiah Smith really is. Another guy I think everyone should have their eye on in that same position. When it comes to those high school rankings, he was just 1 point lower than Williams and Smith. Cam Coleman on Auburn. He's not as good as those two, but Cam Coleman is going to turn some heads. He's coming in as a true freshman starting for Auburn. He's 6'3", and he's just a dog. He only has 9 receptions. He only has 200 yards. Once he settles into that offense, and once the Peyton Thorne experiment is finally, once he's benched, because Peyton Thorne is upsetting, to say the least, Cam Coleman is going to lead this Auburn team for years to come, because he's going to be that good. But the other freshmen that you really have to look at that have been lighting the league on fire, Dylan Raiola, the most obvious one. As a true freshman, coming out and doing what Dylan Raiola is doing is pretty crazy. 1,200 yards, 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions on a Nebraska team that is 4-1, and their only loss being an overtime loss to a ranked Illinois team. You don't see this from true freshman quarterbacks. It just doesn't happen. Being able to come in as a receiver, it's impressive. But as a quarterback at the college level, you have so much pressure on you. So much revolves around you as an 18-year-old. You don't see this happen. There's plenty of freshmen that I think could do it. Dylan Raiola seems to be the only one that took the opportunity to go to a smaller school and start immediately, and it is benefiting him because Raiola has looked fantastic. Nebraska is going to get to build around him for the next 2 years, and I don't want to call them Big Ten contenders. They're not this season, but they could be behind Dylan Raiola. That's just how good he is playing in his freshman year. And the last name that I want to bring up is Dylan Stewart out of South Carolina. This guy is insane. His stats aren't going to jump off the board, but if you watch South Carolina play, Dylan Stewart is the biggest playmaker on the entire team. The entire team. It is Dylan Stewart that can break a game. Week 1, Old Dominion, it's a group of 5 school, but he goes out and throws multiple linemen in the same play and gets a sack to seal the game. Against Kentucky, that's an SEC school. He looked dominant. one sack, but when you disrupt the quarterback, when you disrupt the run game the way Dylan Stewart does, that's still very important. He goes out against LSU, and he's disrupting every single play against two of the best tackles in all of college football, and Will Campbell and Emory Jones. It doesn't matter, because Dylan Stewart, as an 18-year-old, is one of the best edge rushers in all of college football. This freshman class that we're looking at right now is the best one we've seen in years, and it's not close. This true freshman class, just based off of what they're doing in their true freshman year, is something we have not seen before. It is insane. Specifically, these four guys in Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams, Dylan Raiola, Dylan Stewart. This class is dominant. As true freshmen, this class is already dominating. It's insane that these 17, 18-year-olds are able to come out and do this. Bringing it back to the NFL, there's three players that I just want to go over. Had great performances. Overall, their seasons have been strong. And the first one started off slow. 199 yards on the ground and a 35-10 win over the 3-0 Buffalo Bills. Derrick Henry has returned. Derrick Henry is back. He was only gone because John Harbaugh was an idiot and wouldn't give him the ball, but he gave him the ball this game. And just like that, Derrick Henry is not only back, but Derrick Henry is back to the very top of the rushing leaders in the entire NFL. He's leading the league in rushing in the entire NFL through 4 weeks. Off of that game, pretty much just that game. Derrick Henry is just a freak. As a 30-year-old on the Baltimore Ravens, Derrick Henry is leading the league in rushing yards. How does that happen? It's insane. And hopefully John Harbaugh continues to give him the ball. But Derrick Henry just had to come out and remind everyone who he was. And honestly, remind the Ravens who he was, because this man needs to eat. Another player, Nico Collins, currently leads the league in receiving yards, but it's not by a small margin. No, it's by 103 yards. 103 yards between Nico Collins and the second leading receiver. He has 489 yards in 4 games. He's averaging over 120 yards a game. We've been talking all season. The Texans are going to spread the ball out. The Texans have 3 receiver ones. Stephon Diggs is going to take yards and targets and whatever away from Nico Collins came out and solidified himself as the number 1 receiver in Houston and probably a top 10 receiver in the league, minimum. Because what he is out here doing is crazy. He doesn't make the crazy, flashy, contested catch. He doesn't get the giant deep ball. But when you have a guy like Nico Collins who's just always open 15, 20 yards down the field, and you have Stroud at quarterback, who's surprised? The way Nico Collins is open, every play is a safety valve, and then you have one of the smartest quarterbacks in the NFL in CJ Stroud. It's a match made in heaven. Nico Collins is on pace to have a season over 2,000 receiving yards. Will that happen? No, it will not. But on pace to have over 2,000 receiving yards after 4 weeks. That's insane. If you told me before the season started that Tyreek Hill would be doing it, CeeDee Lamb would be doing it, Justin Jefferson would be doing it, Jamar Chase, I wouldn't be surprised. If you told me Nico Collins, I would look at you funny. But Nico Collins is the real deal. Nico Collins is the receiver 1 in Houston, and right now the receiver 1 in the NFL. One more player. Just want to talk about the situation. Rashee Rice is most likely out for the season. Probably towards ACL. I don't think they've confirmed it, but it was a bad injury. What are the Chiefs doing without Rashee Rice? Because now their receiver 1 is Hollywood Brown. I don't know. The answer with the Chiefs is Travis Kelce has to be Travis Kelce, because I don't know what's been happening so far, but Travis Kelce has looked like a bum out there. I think he is getting out-received by Noah Gray at the moment. The Chiefs will figure out a way. They always find out a way. It helps them that they'd probably be 0-4 without the refs right now, but again, it happens, whatever. The Chiefs aren't going to win a Super Bowl off of they didn't deserve to win it, but the refs helped. That's not going to happen. The Chiefs always find a way. Patrick Mahomes always finds a way. I think they'll be fine, but losing Rashee Rice is a big hit to that offense. Back to college football. I know we're jumping around a lot, but there's so much to talk about. The Heisman race. In my opinion, right now, it is a 4-person race. 4 people. I'm going to give them to you in order. I'm going to give you my top 5. Again, I think it's a 4-person race, but if I had to put a 5th person, Nico Iamaleava, I probably butchered that. Tennessee's quarterback, Nico. He's played incredibly. In Tennessee right now, they look scary. With him at the helm leading that offense, I'd put him at number 5 right now. But I think there is a gap between him and number 4. At number 4, Cam Ward of the Miami Hurricanes. He has looked so good. I can't point out a flaw. All I can point out is how much I like the other 3 more. But Cam Ward, what he is doing is insane. I didn't expect... I had him in my top 10 quarterbacks. I didn't have him that high. I didn't think he was this good. But a lot of outlets have him at number 1 or 2 right now. And if you're going with the ideology that it's a quarterback's award, he is top 2. He's having a top 2 season out of every quarterback in the NCAA, and you could argue one very easily. Cam Ward is in this Heisman race. At number 3, I have Travis Hunter. What he's doing as a receiver is extremely impressive. I don't think he's special as a receiver. I don't think he's a guy that's going to go in the first round as a receiver. But he's currently top 5 in receiving yards. He is a weapon on that offense. He's a good receiver. Throw in the fact that he might be the best zone coverage corner in the NCAA. That he's a top 3, top 4, top 5 corner in the NCAA. And he's in that top 5 to top 10 receiver race. And Colorado's actually winning this season. They're having a decent season so far. Yeah, I have to put him up here. I don't like falling for the Travis Hunter hype because last season he got overrated, and at the beginning of this season he also got overrated. But I take it back. Anything I said, I take it back because what he's doing is unheard of. It's not unheard of. It's what Charles Woodson did, and we all know how that went. Travis Hunter is ridiculous. At number 2, that's where I have Jalen Milroe. He's had a great season, and he jumps up to number 2 because of that game against Alabama. Because we talked about it earlier. He had almost 500 yards and 4 touchdowns between passing and running. His season has been incredible. He's not a guy that I'm a huge fan of. I've been very critical of him, but he has shut me up. He is having an unbelievable season. I have him at number 2 here. I could see an argument for number 1. I went back and forth between him and number 1, but who I have at number 1? The running back out of Boise State, Ashton Jeanty. Leading the league in rushing yards by about 200. 10.3 yards a carry. He has 13 touchdowns. like, what can you even say about this guy? In 4 games, he has 845 yards. So he's getting about 211 yards a game on 10.3 yards a carry. If you hand him the ball, you get a first down, theoretically. And in 4 games, he has 13 touchdowns. And he's group of 5. He's not playing anyone. His worst game this season was against Portland State. We had no touchdowns, actually, and 127 yards, only 11 carries. Week 1, Washington State. That's a Power 5 school. 259 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns. Oregon, ranked number 7 in a 3-point loss. 192 yards, 3 touchdowns. Georgia Southern, group of 5 school, but you play who's in front. 267 yards and 6 touchdowns. This is unheard of. This doesn't happen. He is currently on pace. And on-pace stats obviously don't mean too much. But he is on pace to have about 2,500 rushing yards and about 40 touchdowns. He's number. If the season ended right now, he's my Heisman. If the season ended right now, he's my Heisman, because that's just not something that happens. Quickly bringing it back to the NFL. I think this is the last one I have NFL related, and it's going to be quick. But the Rookie of the Year race is heating up. The Defensive Rookie of the Year race, not so much, but the Offensive Rookie of the Year race is looking so nice. Jaden Daniels has looked like an absolute beast. Like every week he gets better. It's crazy. He is currently my Rookie of the Year. He's a quarterback. My number 2 is Malik Neighbors, who's looking like a top 10 receiver already with a bad quarterback. Malik has looked insane. And at number 3, I have Brock Bowers. All 3 of these guys, insane rookie seasons, all 3 of them. I tried to say before the season started, Malik Neighbors is a top 5 talent. Brock Bowers is a top 5 talent. They're showing it. They are showing it. I said Brock Bowers was the steal of the draft, which makes no sense because he was picked pretty high, but he's still the steal of the draft. Brock Bowers is... You're getting a left tackle that's also a receiver. Like, you're getting Kyle Pitts if he actually caught the ball. Brock Bowers is unbelievable, but those 2 LSU guys, I can't say enough good about them. When it comes to Defensive Rookie of the Year race, there's not really anyone impressing me too much. Jared Verse, solid season. Laiatu Latu, solid season. Dallas Turner, solid season. I've watched some Eagles games, and I have liked what I've seen from Quinion Mitchell. But overall, there's not a single defensive rookie that's really impressed me too much. If I had to give you 3 guys right now, it would be Verse, Latu, and Turner, which is no surprise. I'd probably give it to Jared Verse, even though he's not a prospect I liked. He's having a fine season. Overall, this defensive rookie class isn't great. Back to college football again. Last time, there's just so much happening. I kind of switched back and forth throughout the video. We had multiple games where 2 ranked opponents met, and they were some pretty important ones. Firstly, Penn State comes out and in a boring one takes down Illinois. That was a win that Penn State needed because there was still a question mark next to them. Mostly because of that Bowling Green game. But Penn State is a team that should just always have a question mark next to them as long as James Franklin is their coach. But they come out and get themselves a quality win, which is important for them because it's looking like they could make that 12-team playoff. Another big game. Louisville goes to South Bend to play Notre Dame, and Notre Dame beats them by 7 points. This is a game that I predicted Louisville to win, but Notre Dame comes out and snags this one. This is rough for Louisville because they still have Miami and Clemson on the season. If they can pull one of those out, great. They lose both of those, like I would project right now. They aren't going to the ACC championship, and they aren't going to the playoffs. because 2 losses is already questionable. But this loss to Notre Dame, if they lose to Notre Dame, Miami, and Clemson, which I would expect as of now, that those playoff hopes are gone. This would have been a very big win for Louisville because it probably would have bumped them up into that top 12 ranking, and they drop it. It's a big one for Notre Dame. Notre Dame could not afford this loss because that loss to Northern Illinois hurt them a lot. But now Notre Dame, looking like they could just go undefeated the rest of the season. Florida State fell off. They're trash now. The only real game they have in the rest of their schedule is USC in week 12. But grabbing their wins against A&M and Louisville are going to help them when it comes down to that playoff race as an independent. The last one, Oklahoma State versus Kansas State. If you remember, I predicted Oklahoma State to make the Big 12 championship game, and I predicted them to make the playoffs. And Oklahoma State is now 0-2 in their conference, and I would say the door has already shut on their Big 12 title contention, which is disappointing, but they just got smacked by Kansas State. They lost by 22. That loss to Utah had already hurt. They still have to play BYU. They still have to play Baylor, which are droppable games. Texas Tech, Colorado, like, they have a tough schedule. Starting with 2 losses in the conference, they're probably done. Meanwhile, for Kansas State, you definitely got a little resurgence after that awful game against BYU. And because of how crazy the Big 12 is, they're right back into that Big 12 race. If they take down Colorado this upcoming week, they really don't have too much competition up until week 12 against Iowa State. So that win against Oklahoma State and that convincing win against Oklahoma State is a big one for them. I got one more thing and then we're going to wrap it up. I want to talk about the Karl Anthony Towns to the Knicks trade, and I'm going to open it with both teams lost. Both teams lost this trade. I don't know why Minnesota gave up Karl Anthony Towns. I thought he was still a very useful player in that system. And I don't think you're getting anything from Julius Randle or DiVincenzo that you really needed. Because when is DiVincenzo playing? When is Dante DiVincenzo seeing the court? He's not starting. And then your guard depth, like, you brought in Dillingham and Terrence Shannon Jr. So is he going to play the 3? Because DiVincenzo and Julius Randle on the floor hurts your defense a lot. Cat was not a great defender, but he was a better one than Julius Randle. And Julius Randle happens to also be coming off of a shoulder surgery. If I had to choose a winner, I would choose the Knicks because in terms of pure talent, the Knicks got a talented center. And now when you look at their starting 5, you're going to see Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, Karl Anthony Towns. Like, you're going to see a very strong roster. I just don't know what you really gained out of losing depth at guard. I don't know. I don't, because now his replacement is going to be like Miles McBride. Josh Hart may have to play a little more guard. Like, I know they needed a center, but I wouldn't have gone about it this way because DiVincenzo was a very solid depth piece. And Randall was a guy that, I mean, Julius Randle has his issues, obviously, but how much of an upgrade is Karl Anthony Towns to make it worth losing that depth that you had with DiVincenzo? For Tibbs, it might have been worth it because, you know, Tibbs doesn't do depth too often, but I don't know. I thought both teams lost here. I thought it was a random trade. I thought it was a trade that didn't make sense, and that's still where I'm sitting at. I don't like this trade for either side. If I had to give you a winner, it would be the Knicks, because that starting 5 of Brunson, Bridges, Anunoby, I mean, someone's going to run somewhere else. I guess Josh Hart. And then Cat at the center. It sounds really nice. It does. That's a great starting 5. But your depth, you lost some depth there. You lost some depth there. But especially for Minnesota, I don't like this trade. Because you took out your second best offensive, like you took out your second best scorer. And his replacement will be Naz Reid. You will see Naz Reid and Rudy Gobert on the floor together next season. That, or it'll be Julius Randle. And DiVincenzo's not going to start. This trade sucks. For both teams, but especially the Timberwolves. I don't like this trade whatsoever. That is all I have for today. That is my list of ridiculousness from this week. But thank you for watching. Hope you liked it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of The Wolf Den. If you're on YouTube, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. For those of you on Spotify, make sure to follow the show and rate it 5 stars if you enjoyed it. Thank you guys for listening to this episode, and I hope to see you next time on The Wolf Den.